Do you have your own theory about why we do have young people committing more violent crimes at the moment?
It's from home. Yeah, it's the connection from home. If the kid doesn't have it at home, they're going to go out and find it.
South Sudanese community leaders in Melbourne are demanding urgent action after 2 children were killed in a machete attack at the weekend.
Victorians feel unsafe and they're pissed off. Do you understand that?
I certainly understand the perception around safety because it's so important. If people don't feel safe in their communities, then we've got to do something about it.
Hey, y'all be with dreadheads, nigga. Look, and them dreadheads turn you to a dead man. Don't even bother coming out with a vest.
What you're looking at isn't a drill video in London, Chicago, or even New York. This is Melbourne, Australia, where drill music and the rise in youth crime is becoming a serious issue. Youth crime in Melbourne is at record highs, and it is becoming increasingly clear the police do not know how to handle it. Just the other month, a 12 and 15-year-old were murdered in a double killing linked to a drill gang.
There's been a major breakthrough in a Cobblebank crime that shocked the nation. 7 teens have been charged with the alleged murder of 2 young boys killed on their way home from basketball.
And these youth aren't just killing each other. They are running in houses, carjacking vehicles, even setting fires to bins, all while posting their crimes to social media. What's happening in Melbourne is a system on edge, and today we'll be exploring the real cause of everything. As an outsider, when you think of Melbourne, you're probably thinking this: skyscrapers, good coffee and good vibes, in what the media dubbed as the most livable city in the world. But the truth is, Melbourne has never been perfect. In the 70s to 80s, Melbourne was plagued by drugs, police corruption, and street gangs. In the 90s to 2000s, the city's criminal underworld was literally at war, which saw a string of 36 back and forth murders stretched over 12 years. But now it's kids. Kids barely old enough to drive are breaking into homes, stealing luxury cars, and stabbing each other just because of where they live. And many are pointing towards the city's rising drill music phenomenon. Now, Aussie drill isn't a new thing. Off the back of UK drill success, Australian drill started to find its own voice. But not in Melbourne. Instead, 800 kilometers away in Western Sydney. Sydney's drill scene was actually quite big. It took the energy of UK drill and flipped it into something raw, local, and unapologetically Australian. The biggest to come out the scene was a group named 1-4, who were a group of boys from one of Sydney's most tough suburbs, Mount Druitt. And they got hundreds of millions of streams across their career, and are still outstreaming a lot of American and UK groups till this very day. But 1-4 drew massive media attention, and most of it wasn't positive. Violent brawls, police raids, and harsh lyrics were their public image. And as you can probably guess, a lot of Aussie people didn't approve. But behind all the controversy, 1-4 were extremely influential. After their success, the Aussie drill sound caught on in other major cities like Brisbane and Adelaide, but most notably right now in Melbourne. Melbourne's drill feud is much more different to Sydney's. Western Sydney's street politics are much more generational and structured, passed down through the older generations and confined to a small number of suburbs. But Melbourne is just a complete free-for-all. Here, the rivals aren't generational. They are spontaneous, chaotic, and just downright out of control. They are also ethnically quite different. In Sydney, drill came out of the Pacific Islander community, mainly from kids of Samoan, Tongan, and Fijian heritage growing up in the West. But in Melbourne, the story is different. Here, the scene has largely been shaped by young African Australians, particularly from South Sudan. For more than half a century, the north and south of Sudan has been locked in conflict. The north, mainly Arab and Muslim, controlled the government and resources, while the south, largely African and Christian, was left isolated, sparking 2 brutal civil wars. In 2011, South Sudan finally managed to gain independence from the north, but this didn't stop the trouble. In South Sudan alone, there are more than 60 ethnic groups speaking over 80 different languages. And just like many other African countries, putting so many different cultures and beliefs under one government has been disastrous, creating massive political power struggles and civil wars between different ethnic groups, which probably isn't going away anytime soon. All in all, the Australian government has been quite supportive of Sudan's problems, with various foreign aid programs and peacekeeping efforts. In fact, outside Outside of Africa, Australia has taken in one of the largest Sudanese communities in the world, second only to the United States, with around 30,000 Sudanese-born residents and roughly 50,000 people of Sudanese heritage, now calling Australia home. The majority living in Victoria, the state that holds the city of Melbourne, but the Sudanese community has seen its fair share of controversy since arriving, and none was bigger than the 2016 Moomba Festival riots.
Well, Moomba celebrations have been marred by violence after a number of brawls erupted in the CBD over the weekend. Teenagers could be seen fighting near St Paul's Cathedral, throwing punches and clashing, while violence also broke out at Flinders Street Station.
This event led to quite a weird time in Melbourne, in what a lot of people dubbed as the African Panic. Starting in March of 2016 till November of 2018, in the run-up to the Victorian state elections, the two phrases African gangs and apex gangs became some of the most repeated terms in Australian media, appearing over 1,000 times in news articles alone, despite people of African background accounting for only 1% of total crime in Victoria. Near enough every day African crime was being addressed in the media. African community leaders tried desperately to clean up the image, working with the police and government to clean up growing concerns. But while community leaders were out trying to fix the problem, some of the youth began adding fuel to the fire. With all the spotlight now on what the media called African gangs, certain groups of African youth began capitalizing on the controversy. One of the first was a group called Menace to Society, who were a collection of mainly Sudanese teenagers from Melbourne suburbs, and they really weren't helping the cause, dropping violent music and creating bad headlines through their antics. But since then, it's got worse. Melbourne drill music has become much more violent and much more direct. No longer is it just groups of kids boasting about being menaces and getting into the odd fight. People are actually dying and being name dropped in songs. One of those killed was a Melbourne rapper known as Peasy, who was shot and killed shortly after releasing a new music video. And he isn't the only one. From the last 5 years or so, all these people you're seeing on the screen have died in Melbourne as a result of rival street drill gangs, many of which are civilians, including this 12-year-old boy who was murdered in a double stabbing a couple months back while coming back from a basketball match. Community leaders, police and politicians are now pleading with communities who are suffering with the consequences of these actions. And for the South Sudanese community, who have found themselves overrepresented in this field, certain families have even started sending their kids back home. But this isn't just a murder wave going on here in Melbourne. This is a full crime epidemic. Vehicle thefts are up 42% in Melbourne, and home invasions are rising 21% year on year. The lawlessness going on in Melbourne right now is something you'd expect to see in a place like Brazil. Youth gangs are literally running into houses, kidnapping residents and clearing them for everything they've got. And kids as young as 13 are stealing luxury cars and posting them to social media almost as if it's nothing. And the craziest part, a lot of these kids aren't even scared of getting caught. Because in Victoria the laws are so soft. If you are under 18, you can break into houses, steal cars, even assault someone, and in most cases you'll be out the next day. In one case, a 13-year-old boy was allowed to walk free after killing 16-year-old Sam Cutler because the judge deemed him too young to bear responsibility. And 3 years later, he was caught committing the crime you're seeing on your screen now. A brutal home invasion which saw a 60-year-old man stabbed countless times, shot in the arm and bashed repeatedly with a hammer. Police officers have been saying it for years. They arrest the same teenagers every week. Some of them have dozens of charges and are still walking free today. Compared to other countries like the UK or the US, where juvenile offenders can face tough sentencing if the crime is severe enough, Victoria's justice system focuses on diversion, rehabilitation and early intervention, as they say, which pretty much means trying to rehabilitate young offenders while still being free. But with crime climbing and gangs seemingly having no fear, a lot of people are starting to ask, is the system being taken advantage of? With crime rates hitting record highs, the state police are being forced to rethink everything. Just recently, a machete ban was introduced statewide, which made carrying a machete illegal, and now they are looking to introduce more operations and task forces to keep a good eye on those offending. But from what it's seeming like on the streets of Melbourne, it will take much more than weapon bans and surveillance to stop this city from spiraling into further chaos.